In the quiet countryside near Kennedy, Texas, sits the John B. Connolly Unit, a maximum security prison surrounded by barbed wire steel fences and razor-sharp routines. It was here, in December of 2000, that 7 inmates pulled off one of the most daring, well-orchestrated prison escapes in U.S. history. These men, each serving time for violent crimes, became known as the Texas 7. The leader of the group was George Rivas, a smart, charismatic, and calculating man serving 99 years for kidnapping and armed robbery. He wasn't a thug, he was methodical. He had spent years observing how the prison worked when the guards changed shifts, when maintenance crews moved around, and who was paying attention or not. Rivas quietly built a team. 6 other men, Joseph Garcia, Michael Rodriguez, Randy Halprin, Larry Harper, Patrick Murphy, and Donald Newberry, each had a long rap sheet: murder, attempted murder, robbery. None had anything to lose. For weeks, maybe months, they crafted a plan down to the smallest detail. They would trick the guards into letting them into a maintenance area from their banes, steal uniforms, radios, weapons. One man would impersonate a guard over the radio, another would call in a fake emergency. They even created a fake work order. It was a plan straight out of a Hollywood script, but this wasn't fiction. On that cold December afternoon, the plan went into motion. The men entered the prison's maintenance area, they ambushed civilian workers, tied them up, and took their clothes. Then, one by one, they lured more staff and guards, supervisors using fake calls and radios. By the end, they had captured more than a dozen people. They stole guns from the armory, radios, and keys. One of them posed as a guard over the radio. Then, dressed as prison workers, they loaded stolen equipment into a prison maintenance truck and drove it right out the front gate. It was hours before the prison realized they were gone. By then, the Texas 7 had disappeared into the Texas night. The group headed to San Antonio, hiding in a rundown trailer park from there. They plotted their next move. They needed money, weapons, and a way to get out of Texas. They robbed stores, stole cars, and used fake names. They stayed in motels, split up briefly, and tried to stay under the radar. But they were also bold. They decided to hit Oshman's Sporting Goods in Irving, Texas, a store that sold guns and cash on Christmas Eve. They walked in like customers, then pulled weapons and tied up the employees. It was clean, fast, until a silent alarm was tripped. Officer Aubrey Hawkins, a 29-year-old father and husband, was enjoying a quiet Christmas Eve dinner with his wife and young son when the call came in. A robbery in progress. He responded alone. As Officer Hawkins pulled up behind the store, he didn't know what he was walking into. The Texas 7 were already outside, heavily armed and waiting. They ambushed him, firing at least a dozen shots. Hawkins was hit 11 times. Then, in an act of cruel finality, they ran over his body with their getaway car. By the time other officers arrived, the Texas 7 were gone, and Officer Hawkins was dead in the snow. The murder of a police officer turned this case from a prison break into a national crisis. The FBI launched a massive manhunt. The Texas 7 were added to the 10 most wanted fugitives list. Their photos were plastered on TV, in newspapers, and on billboards across the country. Weeks passed. Rumors flew. Sightings came in from all over, but they had vanished. Then came the break. A tip came from a viewer of America's Most Wanted. The fugitives had been spotted at an RV park in Woodland Park, Colorado, near Colorado Springs. They were pretending to be Christian missionaries, calling themselves the Children of God. They handed out pamphlets, told neighbors they were rebuilding their lives, but someone recognized them and called it in. On January 22, 2001, federal agents and SWAT teams surrounded the RV park. 5 members, Rivas, Garcia, Rodriguez, Halprin, and Murphy, were arrested without gunfire. Donald Newberry was captured the next day after a tense standoff in a nearby hotel. He called a TV station and ranted on air about injustice and corruption before surrendering. Larry Harper, however, chose not to go back to prison. When agents closed in on him, he put a gun to his head and pulled the trigger. The Texas 7's time on the run was over, but the story was far from done. Back in Texas, each surviving member was charged with capital murder for the killing of Officer Hawkins. The trials were long, emotional, and intensely watched. Each man was found guilty. 5 of the 6 were sentenced to death. Only Patrick Murphy, who had stayed outside the store as a lookout, was not executed, though he remained on death row due to Texas's law of parties, which allows people to be charged equally for a crime if they helped make it happen. Family members of Officer Hawkins packed the courtroom. His widow, Lori Hawkins, gave powerful statements demanding justice for her son and husband. Michael Rodriguez gave up his appeals and was executed in 2008. George Rivas, the leader, was executed in 2012. His final words, "Yes, sir, I do. I do acknowledge my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ." Donald Newberry was executed in 2015. Joseph Garcia followed in 2018. As of 2024, Patrick Murphy and Randy Halprin remain on death row. Their executions have been delayed due to ongoing appeals. Murphy for religious discrimination, he was denied a Buddhist chaplain at his execution, and Halprin for allegations of racism by the judge at his trial. The Texas 7 escape changed Texas prison policy. Forever new security protocols were introduced, and staff were retrained. The escape showed how dangerous and desperate men can turn intelligence and planning into lethal action when they feel they have nothing left to lose. The story is still studied in law enforcement academies. Documentaries have been made, books have been written, but for many in Texas, the most important legacy is a name: Officer Aubrey Hawkins, a young man who left his family on Christmas Eve to protect his city and never came home.